Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're doing something a little different.
Oh.
Yeah, instead of like going through a bunch of different articles, we're going to be focusing on just one single book.
Yep.
All about the human genome, BT.
Okay.
It uses a really cool analogy to try to explain it, which is the analogy of a book.
That's what I found so captivating about it. It really makes it approachable, this
yeah.
really complicated topic.
Yeah, so how does a genome become a book?
So think of it this way. The genome is a book with 23 chapters, right?
Okay.
And those chapters are the chromosomes.
Mm-hmm.
Each chapter contains thousands of stories.
Okay.
And those stories are our genes.
Okay.
Those stories are divided up into paragraphs, which are the coding sections of DNA, called exons.
Okay.
And advertisements, which are the non-coding parts, called introns.
Okay, so wait, so even our DNA has ads.
That's right.
That's a little too relatable if you ask me.
Yeah, I know, right.
But so if the genome is a book, it must be a pretty massive volume, right?
It's massive. It
Yeah.
would be thousands of volumes long, longer than 800 Bibles.
Oh, wow.
And if we were to read this book aloud
Okay.
at a rate of 1 word per second, it would take a century.
Wow. That puts things into perspective. That's incredible.
It's massive.
Well, luckily for us, we have an expert guide here
Well, I don't know about that.
to help us navigate this epic tale.
We'll see.
I'm really excited to dive into this book, uncover its secrets. What do you say? Shall we turn the page?
Yeah, let's begin.
Okay.
The first chapter is aptly titled A
Right.
Recipe for a Body,
Okay.
and it tackles the fundamental question of what is a gene,
Oh.
and the answer is a recipe.
A recipe, okay.
Right.
Now you've got me intrigued.
Okay.
A recipe for what?
It's a recipe for proteins,
You okay?
the building blocks of life.
Okay.
You can think of DNA as like the master blueprint, right?
Okay.
And proteins are the construction workers bringing that blueprint to life.
Mm.
And just like any construction project, there's a foreman, and that's RNA.
Yeah.
It's a messenger
Okay.
that translates the instructions from DNA into proteins.
So DNA, RNA, proteins, it's all connected.
Yeah, they're all...
Each one playing a crucial role
That's right.
in the symphony of life.
Very much so.
Pretty incredible.
It is.
So speaking of the origins of life, the book also delves into the fascinating story of Luca,
Oh, yes.
the last universal common ancestor.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been fascinated by this idea of, tracing life back to its very beginnings.
Yeah.
What does the book tell us about this mysterious ancestor?
For a long time, scientists thought that Luca was a simple organism, like bacteria thriving in really harsh environments.
Okay.
But this book presents a different perspective, challenging that long-held assumption,
Oh.
suggesting that Luca might have been more complex than we thought,
Okay.
possibly resembling protozoa.
Protozoa, like those single-celled organisms you find in like water and soil.
That's right, that's right.
Oh, wow. So you're saying that the earliest life might have been more advanced than we thought.
That's what the book is suggesting, yeah.
That's pretty mind-blowing.
It is.
Yeah, so it like turns our understanding of life's origins upside down in a way.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
It's a shift in perspective.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to chapter 2, which explores the question of how we, Homo sapiens,
Right.
emerged on the evolutionary stage.
Yes, this chapter is called The Human Species.
Okay.
And it delves into the genetic evidence,
Oh, sure.
confirming our close relationship to apes, particularly chimpanzees.
So we're all just apes with a slightly more sophisticated wardrobe? Is that what you're saying?
In a way, yeah.
Okay.
But the book goes beyond just saying, oh, we're related to chimps. It really dives into the question of how we diverged from them.
Yeah.
So it looks at the genetic and environmental factors that led to the emergence of our species.
Okay, so tell me about this evolutionary split.
The book presents the East Side story, which suggests that a geographical barrier separated our ancestors from chimpanzees millions of years ago.
Okay.
And this barrier may have been the formation of the Sahara Desert
Oh, wow.
or a sudden flooding of the Mediterranean basin.
Oh, wow. So like a literal divide created the human species.
That's what the theory suggests, yeah.
That's pretty dramatic.
Yeah, it was a pivotal moment in our evolutionary history.
Yeah.
Because this geographical isolation led to inbreeding within our ancestral group.
Okay.
And that creates what we call a genetic bottleneck.
A genetic bottleneck, and is that a good thing?
Well, it has its pros and cons.
Okay.
A reduction in genetic diversity can make a population more susceptible to diseases or environmental changes, right?
Right, okay.
But in this case, this genetic bottleneck,
Okay.
coupled with a crucial genetic event,
Mm-hmm.
the fusion of 2 chromosomes in our ancestors, This may have been the defining factor that prevented further interbreeding with other ape lineages.
So essentially like a reproductive barrier that set us on a separate evolutionary path.
Exactly.
It's amazing how these seemingly random events can shape the course of evolution like that.
It is. It's a testament to the power of chance and adaptation.
Yeah, okay, well this brings us to chapter 3, which takes us back in time to the early days of genetics,
Yeah.
when scientists were really just beginning to unravel the mysteries of heredity.
Yeah, this chapter is called The History of Genetics,
Okay.
and it introduces us to Archibald Garrod,
Okay.
who was a brilliant physician.
Okay.
And in the early 1900s,
Mm-hmm.
he proposed this really revolutionary idea
Okay.
that genes are recipes for specific chemicals.
Okay.
And these chemicals, in turn, determine our traits and characteristics.
So he was essentially laying the groundwork for our understanding of proteins,
He will.
even before we even knew what proteins were.
That's right, exactly. He was ahead of his time,
Yeah.
recognizing that inherited diseases were often caused by errors in metabolism, the chemical processes that occur within our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
He even coined the term inborn errors of metabolism to describe these genetic conditions.
It's incredible how these early observations, made long before the advent of all the modern genetic techniques we have today,
Right.
laid the foundation
Yeah, it is.
for our current understanding of genetics.
It is, yeah.
But it sounds like he was not without his critics, right?
Oh, of course not. His ideas challenged the prevailing view at the time,
Okay.
which focused on the inheritance of physical traits
Okay.
rather than the underlying chemical processes.
It sounds like a classic case of a visionary scientist ahead of his time, struggling to convince the scientific establishment
Very much so.
of his revolutionary ideas.
Mhm.
So this chapter also highlights the clash between Mendelian genetics
Oh, yes.
and Darwinian evolution.
Right, right.
So Mendelian genetics versus Darwinian evolution, kind of a battle of the titans.
Yeah, it was a pivotal moment in the history of biology.
Okay.
Because Mendelian genetics, with its focus on discrete units of inheritance, seemed to contradict Darwin's theory of gradual evolution.
Right. Okay, so how did these seemingly conflicting ideas reconcile?
So the book highlights the crucial role of Hermann Joe Muller,
Okay.
who was a geneticist.
Okay.
And in the 1920s, he showed that mutations,
Okay.
which are changes in DNA sequences,
Okay.
could be artificially induced
Oh, wow.
using X-rays.
So wait, so he could actually manipulate genes.
That's exactly right.
Wow, that's groundbreaking.
It was a monumental discovery.
Yeah.
It not only proved that genes could be altered, but also provided a mechanism for understanding how genetic variations arise
Wow.
and contribute to evolution.
So his work helped to bridge the gap between Mendelian genetics and Darwinian evolution
Exactly.
by showing how mutations provide the raw material for natural selection to act upon.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So mutations create variations, and then natural selection kind of favors the variations that enhance survival and reproduction.
That's right.
It's like a beautiful synergy of ideas.
It is.
Okay, so we've gone from kind of these mysterious inheritance patterns
Right.
to the discovery of mutations as a driving force of evolution. Quite a leap forward.
It is.
And speaking of leaps forward, our next chapter takes us into the heart of the genetic code itself,
Oh.
the language of life. Chapter 4,
That's right.
Deciphering the Code.
Yeah. This is a good one.
Sounds like we're about to crack the secrets of life's instruction
Yeah.
manual. I'm ready to decode.
This chapter chronicles the exciting race to decipher the genetic code,
Okay.
the language that DNA uses to store and transmit genetic information.
Okay.
And we meet Francis Crick, one of the co-discoverers of the DNA double helix.
Francis Crick,
Yeah.
one of the giants of molecular biology.
That's right.
Okay, I'm eager to hear about his contribution to cracking the genetic code.
He played a key role.
Yeah.
So Crick, along with other brilliant minds, was determined to unravel this mystery of how DNA, with its four-letter alphabet of nucleotides, adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine, could encode the instructions for building and operating a living organism.
It is mind-boggling to think that this simple four-letter code
I know, it's amazing.
contains all the information needed to create the diversity and complexity of life.
It's incredible.
So how did they even begin to approach this decoding challenge?
So Crick initially proposed a theoretical model for the genetic code
Okay.
called the comma-free code.
Okay.
It was elegant, it was a logical hypothesis, But as with many scientific endeavors, the path to discovery is rarely straightforward.
Right.
It's rarely a straight line.
So Crick's initial theory didn't quite hit the mark.
It didn't.
Okay.
But it sparked a flurry of research, and it inspired other scientists to pursue this challenge
Right.
with renewed vigor.
Science is often a process of trial and error, right?
That's right.
With each misstep getting a little closer to the truth.
Exactly.
So who eventually cracked the code?
The book highlights the work of Marshall Nierenberg and Johann Mattheu, who in 1961 achieved a monumental breakthrough.
Yeah.
They devised an ingenious experiment that allowed them to decipher the first word of the genetic code.
The first word. Okay, now you've really piqued my curiosity. What was this groundbreaking word?
They discovered that the sequence UUU in RNA,
Okay.
remember RNA is the messenger that carries the genetic information from DNA to the ribosome.
Okay.
They discovered that UU codes for the amino acid phenylalanine.
So UUU is the genetic code for phenylalanine.
That's right.
What are the building blocks of proteins?
That's right.
That's amazing.
It was a landmark achievement.
It's like finding the Rosetta Stone of the genetic code.
Yeah, it really is.
Unlocking the secrets of this ancient language.
It opened the floodgates of discovery.
Yeah.
And by 1965, the entire genetic code had been deciphered,
Wow.
revealing this universal language of life
It's incredible.
shared by all organisms on Earth.
And remember Archibald Garrett,
Yes.
the visionary physician who proposed that genes were recipes for specific chemicals. Yes, he was way ahead of his time.
Way ahead of his time.
With the genetic code cracked, scientists can finally confirm Garrett's insight.
Oh, wow.
They pinpointed the exact gene
Okay.
and the specific spelling error responsible for alkaptonuria,
Okay.
the disease that causes black urine,
Yeah.
proving Garrett right decades after his initial observations.
Talk about vindication. It's a reminder that even in science, sometimes it takes time for those revolutionary ideas to be fully accepted and appreciated.
That's right.
So we've gone from these mysterious inheritance patterns to the discovery of mutations,
Yeah,
to deciphering the very language of life.
it is.
What an incredible journey. But before we move on to the next chapter, I'm curious, now that we understand the genetic code, what are some of the practical applications of this knowledge?
Oh, there are so many. I mean, it's revolutionized so many different fields,
Like what?
from medicine and agriculture to forensics and evolutionary biology.
Wow.
For example, in medicine, we can identify specific genetic mutations that cause diseases.
Leading to more accurate diagnoses and targeted therapies.
So we can tailor treatments to an individual's genetic makeup.
That's right. It's personalized medicine.
That's incredible. That's the future.
It
It has so much potential
Right.
to transform healthcare as we know it.
It does. And in agriculture,
Yeah.
understanding the genetic code allows us to develop crops that are more resistant to pests,
Okay.
diseases,
Yeah.
harsh environmental conditions, enhancing food security for a growing population.
Yeah. The applications are vast
They are.
and impactful.
Yeah.
It makes you realize that, understanding the genetic code isn't just some intellectual pursuit.
Right.
It has real-world implications for, our health,
Absolutely.
our food supply,
Yeah.
and even just our understanding of life itself.
Yes, very much so.
Well, that brings us to Chapter 5, which takes a closer look at a specific gene.
Okay.
It's kind of a tragic story,
Yeah.
the Huntington's gene.
Yes, this is a fascinating chapter.
Yeah, Huntington's disease, this devastating neurodegenerative disorder.
Mm-hmm.
It's heartbreaking to witness the progressive decline
It is.
of someone affected by this condition.
Yes.
What does the book tell us about the genetic basis of this disease?
The book tells the story of Nancy Wexler, a scientist whose own family was affected by Huntington's disease.
So, a scientist on a personal mission
Yes.
to unravel the mysteries of a disease that threatened her own family?
That's right. Her mother suffered from Huntington's disease,
Uh,
meaning that Nancy had a 50-50 chance of inheriting the mutated gene.
right.
And driven by this desire to understand and conquer this disease, she dedicated her life to finding the Huntington's gene.
That's an incredible story of determination
It is.
and scientific passion.
Absolutely.
Where did her research lead her?
Her quest took her to Lake Maracaibo in Venezuela,
Okay.
where she studied a large extended family
Right.
with an unusually high incidence of Huntington's disease.
Wow, a remote lake in Venezuela.
I know, right?
It seems like an unlikely place for a genetic breakthrough.
It was a pivotal location
Yeah.
because this particular family, due to its size and the clear inheritance pattern of the disease, provided a unique opportunity to study the genetics of Huntington's disease.
So this family held the key to unlocking the secrets of the Huntington's gene.
Exactly.
That's
And
right.
through painstaking research and collaboration,
Hmm.
Wexler and her team pinpointed the location of the Huntington's gene
Wow.
on chromosome 4.
That's incredible. So after years of dedicated research,
Yeah,
she finally found the culprit gene.
she did.
But what makes the Huntington's gene so unusual, aside from its tragic consequences? I mean, what makes it unique?
It's the nature of the mutation that makes it so unique.
Okay.
It involves a repetitive sequence of 3 DNA letters, CAG.
Like a genetic stutter.
Yeah, you can think of it that way.
Okay.
And the more CAG repeats a person has, the earlier the disease onset,
Oh, wow.
and the more severe the symptoms.
Okay.
And this phenomenon is known as anticipation, and it's a hallmark of Huntington's disease.
So it's not just the presence of the mutation, but the number of repeats that determines the severity.
That's right.
That's heartbreaking.
It is.
Knowing that each generation might face a more difficult battle
Yes.
with this disease.
Yeah.
But at least understanding the genetic basis of Huntington's has opened up new avenues for research,
Oh, absolutely.
with scientists working tirelessly now to develop treatments that might slow down the progression or even potentially reverse its effects.
That's right.
So it's a glimmer of hope
Yes,
for those affected by this devastating disorder.
it is.
Well, let's move on to Chapter 6, which explores the genetics of a condition
Okay.
that affects millions of people worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
Asthma.
Yes, asthma genes.
Asthma, a condition that can range from mild to life-threatening.
Yes.
I've always wondered about the role of genes in this complex disease.
Right.
Is there a single asthma gene, or is
Yeah.
it more complicated than that?
It's rarely that simple, especially when it comes to these chronic diseases. The book emphasizes that asthma is a multifactorial condition,
Okay.
meaning that it arises from a combination of genetic and environmental factors.
So it's not just about inheriting the wrong genes, so to speak.
Right.
Our environment, our lifestyle choices, these all play a role.
Really? So the book talks about the hygiene hypothesis,
Oh, okay.
which suggests that the rise in asthma rates in developed countries might be linked to our obsession with cleanliness.
So our quest for a germ-free existence might actually be backfiring on us.
That's the idea, yeah.
Okay.
The hygiene hypothesis proposes that this reduced exposure to microbes, especially in early childhood,
Okay.
might hinder the development of a robust immune system,
Okay.
which could then lead to an oversensitive immune response, making us more susceptible to allergies and asthma triggers.
So our immune systems need a bit of training in early life
They do.
to learn how to distinguish between friend and foe.
That's right.
That's fascinating.
It is. It's a reminder that our bodies have evolved to interact with the microbial world. And disrupting this delicate balance can have unintended consequences.
That's right. Okay. But getting back to the genetics of asthma,
Okay.
the book highlights the work of Bill Cookson,
Right.
a scientist who dedicated his career to hunting for asthma genes.
Yes.
What he discovered, however, is that there's no single gene that dictates whether or not you'll develop asthma.
No.
So it's not a simple on-off switch.
That's right.
Multiple genes are involved.
Multiple genes are involved,
But it's
each
not-
with small effects,
Okay.
contributing to asthma susceptibility.
Okay, so it's really hard to predict then
Very difficult.
who will develop the disease based on genetics alone.
That's right.
Okay, so it's a complex web of genetic and environmental factors
Yeah,
that intertwine to create this condition.
it is.
Okay, and the book uses the ADRB2 gene on chromosome 5 as an example.
Right.
This gene codes for a protein that's involved in the relaxation of airway muscles.
That's right.
So different variations or spellings of this gene can influence how sensitive a person's airways are to triggers like dust mites or pollen or cold air.
That's right.
So even subtle variations in a single gene can have a significant impact
It can.
on asthma susceptibility.
Yeah,
Okay, so it really highlights the intricate nature of these gene-environment interactions
it does.
and just the challenges of predicting these complex diseases
Absolutely.
based on genetics alone.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, let's move on to Chapter 7, which delves into a topic that's often fraught with controversy.
Oh, okay.
Intelligence genes.
Yeah, this is a...
Intelligence genes a topic that always sparks debate and raises questions about nature versus nurture.
Yeah,
Free will, the very essence of who we are.
right.
I'm intrigued, but also a little apprehensive about this chapter.
Yeah, it's a sensitive subject,
Yeah.
but one that's important to explore.
Yeah.
So this chapter is called Intelligence Genes, and it dives into the thorny question of whether or not our genes influence our intelligence.
I can already sense this is going to be a thought-provoking conversation.
Yeah.
But before we dive into the specifics, can we maybe define what we mean by intelligence?
Right, because it's such a broad and multifaceted concept.
Right.
Intelligence is a complex trait that encompasses various cognitive abilities, including problem solving, reasoning, memory, language skills.
Right.
The book acknowledges this complexity
Okay.
and focuses on a specific measure of intelligence IQ.
IQ intelligence quotient, the standardized test that attempts to quantify intelligence.
Yes.
It's a controversial measure, but often used in research.
It is, yes.
So the book discusses studies of twins and adopted children,
Yes.
which suggests that IQ has a significant heritable component,
That's right.
meaning that genes do play a role.
That's right.
But hold on, doesn't environment play a huge role as well?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, what about things like access to education?
Of course.
Socioeconomic factors, early childhood experiences, these all have a profound impact on cognitive development.
They do. So,
The book acknowledges this,
Yeah.
the significant influence of environmental factors on intelligence.
yeah.
In fact, it highlights a phenomenon known as the Flynn effect,
Okay.
which refers to the observed rise in average IQ scores over time.
So we're getting smarter as a species.
It appears so, at least according to IQ tests, yeah.
Okay.
This upward trend in IQ scores suggests that environmental factors,
Yeah.
such as improved nutrition, education, access to information,
Right.
these have a substantial impact on cognitive abilities.
So it's a nature and nurture situation.
Very much so.
Our genes might provide the potential, but our environment shapes how that potential is realized.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so the book presents this balanced view, emphasizing the interplay
Right.
of genes and environment.
Yes.
It also delves into the work of Robert Plumman,
Yes.
who is a behavioral geneticist
Yes.
who has spent decades searching for specific genes that contribute to intelligence.
Yes, that's right.
So there are actual genes that have been linked to intelligence. There are, yes.
Tell me more about Plowman's research.
So Plowman has used a variety of approaches, including twin studies and what we call genome-wide association studies,
Okay.
to identify genes associated with variations in IQ.
Okay.
And his research has identified numerous genes that contribute to intelligence.
Okay.
But importantly, each gene only has a small effect.
Okay, so there's no single intelligence gene that determines our cognitive destiny.
No, not at all.
Okay.
And to further complicate matters, the book throws in this curious finding
Okay.
that people with higher IQs tend to have more symmetrical bodies.
Wait, what? Body symmetry and intelligence.
Yeah.
How are those two things even related?
It's a very intriguing observation
Yeah.
that has puzzled scientists for a long time.
Yeah.
And the book suggests that body symmetry might be a marker of developmental stability,
Okay.
the ability to withstand environmental insults
Okay.
during development.
Okay.
So individuals with more symmetrical bodies might have been exposed to fewer stressors during their early development,
Interesting.
allowing their brains to develop more optimally.
So it's not that symmetrical bodies directly cause higher intelligence,
Right.
but rather that both traits might reflect this shared underlying factor of developmental stability.
Exactly.
Wow, that's fascinating.
It is?
It makes you wonder about all the subtle ways in which our genes and environment interact
Yeah.
to shape who we are.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to Chapter 8, which explores a uniquely human trait.
Oh, language.
Language. The tool that allows us to communicate, to share ideas,
Yeah.
to build relationships, to create art,
Yes.
to shape the world around us.
It's fundamental to the human experience.
It really is. So what insights does the book offer into the origins of this incredible faculty?
So the book takes us on a journey through the history of linguistic theory
Okay.
and introduces us to Noam Chomsky.
Noam Chomsky, one of the most influential intellectuals
That's right.
of our time.
Yes.
His work on language has had a profound impact on so many different fields, from linguistics and cognitive science to philosophy and political thought.
Absolutely.
So what does the book say about him?
So Chomsky challenged the prevailing view that language was solely a product of learning,
Oh.
arguing that humans are born with an innate capacity for language,
Okay.
what he called a language instinct,
Okay.
hardwired into our brains.
So there's more to language than just mimicking what we hear.
That's right.
It's something that's ingrained in our very nature.
That was his argument.
Wow.
And the book presents evidence supporting this view,
Okay.
highlighting the universality of language across cultures.
Okay.
The
Something driving this remarkable ability to learn and use language so effortlessly. But is there any genetic evidence
There is.
supporting this language instinct?
Yeah, the book introduces the fascinating case of the KE family,
Okay.
a family with a specific language impairment.
Okay.
That's been linked to a mutation on chromosome 7.
Okay, so a family with a language impairment, how does that help us understand the genetics of language?
This KE family's language impairment is unique because it specifically affects their ability to grasp grammatical rules,
Okay.
making it difficult for them to form grammatically correct sentences,
Okay.
suggesting that there might be genes that are specifically involved in processing grammar,
Wow.
which is a fundamental component of language.
So this family's genetic mutation reveals a chink in the armor of the language instinct,
Exactly.
exposing the genetic machinery that underlies our ability to understand and use grammar.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And it really supports this idea that language is not solely a product of learning, but also influenced by our genes.
That's right.
It's a reminder that even our most complex and seemingly abstract abilities have a biological basis.
They do.
Okay, so we've explored the building blocks of life, the origins of our species, the history of genetics, the genetic code, and these fascinating stories of specific genes
Right.
and their influence on disease, intelligence, and language.
It's quite a journey.
It is. It really is. Well, let's move on to chapter 12, time to get a little personal,
Okay.
with personality genes.
Oh, yeah.
Are we really born with certain personality traits hardwired into our DNA?
So this chapter explores the connection between genes and personality traits, a field called behavioral genetics.
Okay.
That's a controversial area,
Yeah, I can see why it would be.
but it offers some really intriguing insights.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that our genes could shape our personalities raises all sorts of questions about nature versus nurture, free will, and what makes us who we are. So what are some of the specific genes and traits the book focuses on?
One prominent example is the D4DR gene,
Okay.
which has been linked to novelty-seeking behavior.
Okay.
So this gene codes for a dopamine receptor, a
Okay.
protein in the brain's reward system.
Okay.
And different versions of this D4DR gene can influence our sensitivity to dopamine,
Okay.
which in turn can affect our tendency to seek out new experiences and take risks.
Dopamine, the feel-good chemical.
That's right.
So are you saying that some people are hardwired to crave more thrills?
That's the theory.
Okay.
Those with a particular variant of the D4DR gene might need more stimulation to get that same dopamine rush,
Oh, interesting.
which could explain why they're drawn to novelty, adventure, even risky behaviors.
Wow, so a tiny variation in a single gene
Right.
can influence something as complex as personality.
Yes,
That's incredible.
it is.
What about other traits? Is shyness also linked to our genes?
The book highlights the work of Jerome Kagan, who's a psychologist who studied the biological basis of temperament.
Okay.
And he found that infants who react really strongly to new stimuli,
Right.
showing things like increased heart rate, muscle tension,
Mhm.
are more likely to develop shy and inhibited personalities later in life.
So shyness could have roots in our biology,
Yeah, it's possible.
specifically in how our brains and bodies kind of react
That's right.
to new situations.
Yeah, Kagan's research suggests that shyness might be linked to differences in the amygdala,
Okay.
the part of the brain that processes emotions, especially fear and anxiety.
So some people are wired to be more sensitive to those emotional triggers.
That's right.
Incredible. It really makes you wonder how much of our personality is shaped by our genes
Yeah.
and how much is influenced by our experiences.
It's the age-old question.
It is.
Nature versus nurture. It's a
First-
complex dance between the two.
Right. Our genes provide the raw materials, but then our experiences mold those materials into the unique individuals that we become.
That's a nice way to put it.
And speaking of how our environment shapes us, Chapter 13 takes on a topic that's all too familiar in our modern world. Stress genes.
Yes.
Stress genes, it's a stressful world we live in. Do our genes really play a role in how we handle it?
Absolutely. So this chapter dives into the interplay between our genes, our brains, and our environment when it comes to stress.
Okay.
It's fascinating how our bodies have evolved these complex mechanisms
Right.
to cope with challenges. But those very mechanisms can sometimes backfire in the modern world.
Yeah, that makes sense. We're facing different kinds of stress
Yeah.
than our ancestors did.
Yeah.
Right, so tell me more about this interplay.
Okay, so the book challenges this idea that genes are always the cause
Okay.
and behavior is the effect.
Hmm.
It highlights the fact that our actions and experiences can influence gene activity,
Okay.
a concept called gene expression.
Okay.
Our genes can be turned on or off, or their activity can be ramped up or down depending on things like our environment and behavior.
So it's not a one-way street. Our experiences can actually change how our genes work.
Exactly. That's the key takeaway here.
Wow.
So the book kind of walks us through what happens during the stress response.
Okay.
It starts with the perception of a threat.
okay.
So our brains interpret a situation as stressful,
Right.
and that triggers a chain reaction in the body.
Okay, so starts in the brain. What happens next?
So the hypothalamus, a region in the brain,
Okay,
sends signals to the pituitary gland,
okay.
which releases hormones that activate the adrenal glands.
So it's like this chain reaction traveling from the brain to the adrenal glands.
That's right.
Okay, and then what?
So the adrenal glands then release a surge of hormones,
Okay.
including adrenaline and cortisol.
Adrenaline that gives us that quick burst of energy.
Yeah, the fight or flight response.
Right, and then cortisol has a more sustained effect,
That's right.
mobilizing energy stores and suppressing things like digestion and immune system activity.
Yes, cortisol, the stress hormone.
Right, I've definitely felt its effect. It makes sense that stress can suppress the immune system,
It does.
making us more vulnerable to illness.
Right.
But why would our bodies have evolved this system in the first place?
Right, so that's where the evolutionary perspective is really insightful.
Yeah.
In our ancestral past, this stress response was vital for survival.
Okay.
Imagine encountering a predator, right?
Yeah.
You needed that quick burst of energy to escape or fight.
Right.
And suppressing the immune system temporarily
Okay.
allowed the body to redirect resources to those more immediate needs.
So our bodies are kind of primed for these short-term, intense stressors,
Right.
like running from a predator.
Exactly.
But the chronic, low-grade stress that we face today, I mean,
Yeah.
deadlines, traffic, information overload,
It's right. It's a different beast.
it's a different story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the book highlights how this chronic stress can contribute to a wide range of problems.
Like what?
Heart disease, high blood pressure, anxiety, depression,
Wow.
even autoimmune disorders.
It's like our bodies are stuck in overdrive,
Yeah.
constantly reacting to perceived threats
Right.
that aren't actually life or death situations.
That's a good way to put it.
It seems like we need to find ways to kind of rewire ourselves for the modern world.
We do.
Okay, well, let's shift gears a little bit
Oh, yeah.
and journey back in time with Chapter 14, Prehistory.
Oh, I like this one.
What can our genes tell us about our ancestors
Right.
and how humans kind of migrated across the globe?
So this chapter is like a genetic time machine.
Cool.
We use genetic analysis to unravel migration patterns and understand how ancient populations adapted to different environments.
That's really cool. I love this idea of using genetics to piece together our history. So what kind of information can we get from these ancient genes?
One powerful tool is the study of genetic variations.
Okay.
Those differences in DNA sequences between individuals and populations.
Okay.
By analyzing these variations,
Mhm.
we can trace the ancestry of different populations and map their movements across the globe.
So it's like following a trail of genetic breadcrumbs,
Yeah, you could say that.
leading us back to our origins.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some examples of these variations that reveal insights into our past?
One well-known example is the ABO blood group system.
Oh.
You know, the different blood types, A, B, and O.
Right.
These are determined by variations in a gene on chromosome 9
Okay.
and by looking at the distribution of blood types
Yeah.
in different populations.
Right.
We can infer patterns of migration and mixing that occurred over thousands of years.
Wow, fascinating. It's like each blood type tells a story about our ancestral journeys.
That's right.
Okay, well, what other clues can our genes reveal about our ancient past?
So the book dives into this intriguing world of mitochondrial DNA,
Okay.
or mtDNA.
mtDNA.
Unlike most of our DNA, which is located in the nucleus of our cells,
Okay.
mtDNA resides in the mitochondria.
Mitochondria, those tiny energy factories within our cells.
That's right, the powerhouses of the cell.
All right, I remember learning about those in biology class. So what's so special about mitochondrial DNA?
What makes mtDNA unique is that it's inherited exclusively from our mothers.
Oh, okay.
So while nuclear DNA is a mix of genes from both parents,
Right.
mtDNA provides a direct link to our maternal lineage.
So mtDNA is like a genetic time capsule,
It is.
carrying the stories of our mothers, grandmothers, great-grandmothers,
Exactly.
stretching back through time.
That's a great way to put it.
That's amazing.
By analyzing variations in mtDNA,
Oh.
scientists can reconstruct these maternal lineages
Okay.
and trace human migrations back to a common ancestor,
Okay.
often referred to as mitochondrial Eve,
Oh, wow.
who lived in Africa around 200,000 years ago.
So it connects us all back to this single ancestor,
It does.
highlighting the shared heritage of humanity.
Yes.
It really is a global family tree.
It is. It's a powerful reminder that despite our differences, we all share a common origin.
Yeah.
A shared history that's etched in our DNA.
That's a beautiful thought.
It is.
Okay, well, this brings us to chapter 15, which explores a topic that's both fascinating and a little unsettling.
Okay.
Death genes.
Yeah, this one's a bit ominous.
Death genes. Okay, now you've piqued my curiosity. Are we all just living on borrowed time, ticking down to a genetically predetermined end?
So this chapter delves into this complex world of aging,
Okay.
and it explores the role that our genes play in this inevitable process.
Okay.
And while we haven't found any single death gene that dictates our exact expiration date,
Okay.
there are certainly genetic factors
Yeah.
that influence lifespan and contribute to the aging process.
So there's no Grim Reaper gene lurking in our DNA.
Not that we know of.
Okay.
Aging is influenced by so many different factors,
Right, okay.
both genetic and environmental.
Right.
But the book highlights some intriguing genes and mechanisms that
Yeah.
shed light on the biological basis of aging.
I'm eager to hear about these genetic influences on aging. So what insights does the book offer?
One key player is a structure called telomeres, which are located at the ends of our chromosomes.
Okay.
Think of them as like protective caps, like
Yeah.
plastic tips on shoelaces
Okay.
that prevent the ends of chromosomes from fraying or sticking together.
Telomeres, they're like the aglets on our chromosomes. I like that analogy.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Keeping everything from unraveling.
Exactly.
Okay, so tell me more.
The book explains how telomeres shorten with each cell division,
Right.
a process that happens throughout our lives
Right.
as our cells replicate to replace old or damaged ones.
Mm-hmm.
So every time a cell divides,
Okay.
a little bit of the telomere is lost.
So it's like a cellular countdown clock.
Yeah, you could say that our
Cognitive
telomeres are
therapy.
constantly shrinking, and once they reach a critical length, the cell can no longer divide effectively.
So it's like a built-in expiration date for our cells.
That's one interpretation.
Okay.
However, the book also highlights some fascinating exceptions to this rule.
Okay.
Certain animals, like bats and birds,
Good.
they defy typical aging patterns. They live far longer than their metabolic rates would suggest.
That's intriguing. So if their cells are also dividing, their
Yeah.
telomeres are shortening, what's their secret to longevity?
That's one of the big mysteries scientists are trying to unravel,
Yeah.
but it suggests that other genetic factors might be at play.
Okay.
Perhaps genes that protect telomeres from shortening
Okay.
or enhance the repair of cellular damage.
So telomeres aren't the whole story when it comes to aging.
That's right.
There might be other genetic factors that influence how gracefully we age.
Absolutely. The book also delves into the role of free radicals,
Oh, okay.
those highly reactive molecules.
Free radicals, those unstable molecules that can wreak havoc in the body,
Yeah, exactly.
causing all sorts of
They-
damage.
That's right. They can damage DNA, proteins, fats.
So our bodies are producing these harmful molecules as a byproduct of simply staying alive.
That's the trade-off.
Right.
Metabolism is essential for life,
Yeah.
but it inevitably generates free radicals. So the key is to keep these free radicals in check.
Okay.
Our bodies have evolved these antioxidant systems to neutralize them
Okay.
and to protect against their damaging effects.
So it's this constant battle between free radicals, the agents of destruction, and antioxidants, the guardians of cellular health.
You got it.
I like it. That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, and the book suggests that some individuals might have genes that make their antioxidant systems more efficient,
Oh, okay.
which could potentially explain why they age more slowly and live longer.
So a combination of protective genes
Yeah,
and those pesky free radicals battling it out within us.
that's right.
Who will win?
Only time will tell.
Right. But at least understanding these genetic and environmental factors that influence aging
Right.
might one day allow us to slow down the process
Yeah,
and live healthier, longer lives.
exactly.
Now that's something to look forward to.
It is.
Okay, on to chapter 16, and the title alone has me intrigued. Genes are not there to cause diseases.
That's right.
Okay, this sounds like a challenge to conventional thinking.
It is. This chapter challenges the misconception that genes are primarily responsible for diseases.
Oh, wait.
It emphasizes that genes have diverse functions,
Okay.
and diseases often result from a complex interplay between our genes and the environment.
So it's not as simple as saying this gene causes this disease.
No, it's rarely that simple.
Okay.
While certain genes can increase our risk for certain diseases, it's rarely a one-to-one relationship.
Okay.
Our genes provide the blueprint, but our environment and lifestyle choices play a significant role in shaping how that blueprint is expressed.
I like that. Our genes provide the blueprint, But our choices influence the construction.
Exactly. It
Ah.
puts the power back in our hands.
It does, to some extent.
To some extent, yes.
Okay.
The book uses the example of Prader-Willi syndrome and Angelman syndrome.
Okay.
Two very different disorders
Yeah.
that can both be caused by mutations
Okay.
in the same region of chromosome 15.
Wait, two completely different diseases from the same genetic mutation? How is that possible?
This illustrates the concept of imprinted genes.
Okay.
These are genes whose expression is determined by which parent they were inherited from.
Oh, okay.
So in the case of Prader-Willi and Angelman syndromes,
Oh.
the same region of chromosome 15 is involved.
Okay.
But depending on whether the mutation is inherited from the mother or the father,
Okay.
the outcome is drastically different.
So it's not just about the gene itself.
Right.
But also its origin.
That's right.
Wow, that adds another layer of complexity to understanding genetic diseases.
It does.
Okay, so the book goes into the molecular mechanisms behind imprinted genes,
It does.
explaining how certain genes are selectively silenced
Yay.
or imprinted,
Right?
depending on whether they're inherited from the mother or the father.
That's right.
So it's like our parents' genes are still fighting it out even within our own bodies.
It is a battleground.
It's a battleground.
The book discusses David Haig's theory of genetic conflict between maternal and paternal genes, explaining how imprinted genes might reflect this evolutionary tug-of-war
Wow.
over resource allocation.
It's like a genetic arms race playing out within the womb.
You could say that.
Wow. Okay, well, let's move on to chapter 17, memory genes.
Okay.
This is a topic that's always fascinated me, how our brains form and store memories. Does the book offer any insights into the genetic underpinnings of memory?
So this chapter dives into the molecular basis of memory and learning,
Okay.
emphasizing the role of genes in shaping these processes.
Okay.
While there's no single memory gene that determines our ability to remember,
Okay.
certain genes play vital roles in the intricate processes of learning and memory formation.
So it's not as simple as inheriting a good memory from our parents.
No, not quite.
Okay.
Memory is this complex phenomenon involving networks of brain cells,
Okay.
neurons,
Okay.
and a symphony of molecular interactions.
Okay, so what are some of the genes that contribute to our ability to remember?
So one of the stars of this chapter is the CREB gene.
CREP, that sounds familiar. Didn't we encounter that gene in a previous chapter?
Yes, we briefly touched upon CREB in the chapter on personality genes,
That's right.
as it's been implicated in novelty-seeking behavior.
Right, so it's a multitasking gene
It is.
involved in both personality and memory.
Exactly. The book explains that CREB is a transcription factor, a protein that regulates the activity of other genes.
Okay.
In the context of memory,
Hmm.
CREB is activated when neurons are stimulated during learning.
Okay.
And once activated,
Okay.
CREB turns on a cascade of other genes
Okay.
that strengthen the connections between neurons, essentially wiring our brains for memory.
So CREV acts like a switch, turning on the genes that solidify our memories.
Yeah, you could think of it that way.
That's amazing.
And research on animals has shown that manipulating the CREB gene can enhance or impair their learning abilities.
Really?
For example, scientists have created mice with enhanced CREB activity. And these mice show improved memory performance in a variety of tasks.
So if we could tweak this gene in humans,
Yeah.
we could all have photographic memories.
Well, it's not quite that straightforward. While CRB plays this vital role,
Okay.
memory is this complex process involving countless molecular interactions and intricate networks of brain cells.
Right.
Tweaking one gene might not be enough to create superhuman memory abilities.
Yeah, it would be pretty cool, though.
It would be, wouldn't it?
Imagine remembering everything you've ever read or experienced.
Right, imagine.
Wow.
But our memories, with their imperfections and occasional lapses,
Yeah.
those are what make us human. They shape our identities and provide the rich tapestry of our lives.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Our memories, even the imperfect ones,
Yeah,
are an essential part of who we are.
they are.
So what other insights does the book offer into this biological basis of memory?
The book delves into the concept of long-term potentiation, or LTP,
LTP.
a process that strengthens the connections between neurons.
Okay, the synapse?
The synapses, that's right.
Okay.
And LTP is considered one of the key mechanisms underlying learning and memory formation.
So our memories are physically encoded in the connections between our brain cells.
That's right.
It's like our brains are constantly rewiring themselves as we learn and experience new things.
Exactly. Imagine our brains as these vast networks of interconnected neurons, constantly forming and strengthening connections as we learn and experience the world.
Right.
LTP is the process that makes these connections more robust,
Okay.
ensuring that that information is stored more effectively.
It makes you appreciate the complexity
It does.
of the human brain and the remarkable processes that allow us to learn and remember.
It's really quite amazing.
Yeah. And the book also highlights the cases of HM and NA,
Oh, yeah.
two individuals who suffered brain damage
That's right.
that impaired their ability to form new memories.
That's right.
And these cases have provided invaluable insights
They have.
into the crucial role of the hippocampus
Yes.
in memory formation.
Yes. The hippocampus is this seahorse-shaped structure
Right.
deep in the brain
Right.
that plays a vital role in memory.
I've heard of HM. His case is often cited in psychology textbooks as an example of how brain damage can affect memory.
Right, exactly.
So what exactly happened to him?
So HM suffered from severe epilepsy,
Okay.
and in an attempt to alleviate his seizures,
Okay.
surgeons removed a portion of his brain,
Okay.
including the hippocampus.
Wow.
While the surgery was successful in reducing his seizures,
Okay.
it had a devastating side effect.
What was that?
HM lost the ability to form new long-term memories.
So he could remember events from his past,
Yes.
but he couldn't create new memories.
That's right.
He was essentially trapped in a perpetual present.
Exactly.
Wow. That's fascinating, but also tragic.
It is. It is.
He lived in a world where every moment was new, every experience fleeting, unable to retain new information and new
Yeah,
experiences.
That's right.
Wow. So his case provided this compelling evidence that the hippocampus is essential
Right.
for the formation of new long-term memories.
It is essential.
Okay, what about NA? What happened in his case?
So NA's story is equally remarkable, though in a very different way.
Okay.
He was a radar technician in the Air Force.
Okay.
And in this bizarre accident, he was stabbed through the nostril with a miniature fencing foil.
Oh my gosh, that sounds incredibly painful. I can only imagine the damage that such an injury would inflict on the brain.
Yeah, it's hard to even fathom.
So what was the impact on his memory?
So the foil penetrated his brain,
Okay.
damaging a region that connects to the hippocampus.
Okay.
And like HMNA suffered from anterograde amnesia,
Right.
the inability to form new long-term memories.
Wow.
His case provided further evidence that the hippocampus and its surrounding structures are essential for memory consolidation. The process of converting short-term memories into long-term ones.
It's remarkable that despite the very different nature of their injuries,
Right.
both HM and NA experienced similar memory deficits,
Exactly.
pointing to the critical role of the hippocampus in this process.
Exactly. And these cases,
Yeah.
while tragic,
Yeah.
have been invaluable for advancing our understanding of the biological basis of memory.
They underscore the crucial role that genes play
Yes.
in shaping our brains and enabling us to learn,
Right.
remember,
Yeah.
and ultimately become who we are.
It's quite profound when you think about it.
Yeah. Okay, on to chapter 18.
Okay.
And this one has a rather audacious title. Immortality Genes.
This is a good one.
Is this about achieving eternal life? Because if so, sign me up.
Well, not quite eternal life.
Okay.
But this chapter dives into the fundamental challenge of cancer,
Okay.
a disease in which cells defy the body's regulatory mechanisms
Okay.
and proliferate uncontrollably. So you can think of it as a quest for immortality gone wrong.
So cancer is essentially a result of our cells' desire to keep on living,
That's a great way to put it.
even at the expense of the organism as a whole.
Exactly. Our cells are programmed to divide and replicate,
Right.
but this process is tightly regulated
Okay.
to ensure that cells only divide when needed.
Okay.
And they stop dividing when they're supposed to.
It's like this delicate balance between growth and control, a cellular dance that keeps our bodies functioning properly.
Precisely. Cancer arises when this balance is disrupted,
Okay.
and cells break free from these regulatory constraints.
Okay.
So the book explains the roles of oncogenes,
Okay.
genes that promote cell growth,
Okay.
and how mutations in these genes can lead to uncontrolled cell division.
So oncogenes are like the gas pedals stuck in the on position,
That's a great analogy.
pushing cells to divide relentlessly.
That's right.
Okay, but our bodies also have brakes, right?
We do.
What are those?
The book introduces tumor suppressor genes.
Okay, which act as guardians of the genome.
Okay.
They prevent uncontrolled cell division
Okay.
and trigger apoptosis.
Apoptosis, that's cellular suicide, right?
That's right, a self-destruct mechanism
Okay.
that eliminates damaged or unwanted cells.
Okay, so tumor suppressor genes are essential for maintaining this balance
Exactly.
between cell growth and cell death.
That's right.
So it's a constant balancing act between these growth-promoting ontogenes
Yeah?
and the growth-suppressing tumor suppressor genes.
Right. It's a delicate balance.
It is, and when this balance is disrupted,
Yeah.
cancer can arise.
Cancer can arise. That's right.
The book highlights the remarkable story of David Lane,
Oh, yes.
who discovered TP53, perhaps the most famous tumor suppressor gene,
Right.
and even experimented on himself to study its function.
Now that's dedication to science.
Talk about going above and beyond. So is TP53 the key to preventing cancer?
It plays a vital role, but cancer is a complex disease with many contributing factors.
The book emphasizes that cancer often arises from the accumulation of multiple genetic errors that overwhelm the body's defenses.
Okay, so even with powerful guardians like TP53,
Right.
our cells are constantly facing challenges to their integrity.
They are. It's a constant battle.
It's a sobering thought, so even with these tumor suppressor genes working to protect us, cancer is still a major health threat.
Unfortunately, yes, but understanding the genetic and environmental factors that contribute to cancer is crucial for developing more effective prevention strategies and treatments.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to fighting such a formidable foe.
Very true.
Okay, on to chapter 19, engineering genes.
Oh, this is an interesting one.
And this one sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie. Are we talking about designer babies and genetically enhanced humans?
So this chapter explores the potential of genetic engineering to treat diseases and modify human traits. It delves into the realm of gene therapy, which holds both immense promise and ethical challenges.
Yeah, gene therapy, the idea of manipulating our genes to cure diseases or enhance our abilities, is fascinating, but also a little bit daunting.
It is, yeah.
What are some of the specific approaches to gene therapy that the book discusses?
So the book explains that gene therapy involves introducing genetic material into a patient's cells to correct a genetic defect or provide a therapeutic benefit. One approach is to replace a faulty gene with a healthy one, essentially correcting the underlying genetic error.
So it's like performing surgery on our genes, swapping out the defective parts for functional ones.
That's a great way to think about it.
That's a good analogy.
Another approach is to introduce genes that boost the immune system's ability to fight diseases like cancer or HIV.
So it's not just about fixing broken genes.
No.
We can also add new genes to enhance our body's defenses.
That's right.
That's pretty cool.
The possibilities are vast, but so are the challenges.
Right.
The book talks about the technical hurdles of delivering genes to the right cells in the body and ensuring that they're expressed at the right levels. There's also the risk of unintended consequences, like disrupting other genes or triggering an immune reaction.
So it sounds like gene therapy is still in its early stages.
It is.
With a lot of obstacles to overcome before it becomes like a routine medical procedure.
Yes, that's right.
Right.
But the field is rapidly advancing. And there have been some remarkable successes in recent years. The book highlights the story of Jesse Gelsinger, a young man who tragically died in 1999 during a gene therapy trial.
Oh, wow.
His death was a major setback for the field. But it also spurred important improvements in safety protocols and ethical considerations.
Right. It's a reminder that progress in science
Yeah,
is often accompanied by setbacks,
it is.
and that we need to proceed with caution, especially when dealing with such powerful technologies.
Absolutely.
And speaking of ethical considerations, the book also delves into the controversial topic of germline gene therapy,
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting.
where modifications are made to reproductive cells.
Right.
Meaning that the changes would be passed down to future generations.
That's right.
Wow, that's a whole other level of ethical complexity.
It is.
I mean, we're not just talking about treating individuals.
No.
We're talking about potentially altering the genetic makeup of humanity.
That's right. It's a profound responsibility.
It is.
The book discusses the potential benefits of germline gene therapy, like eradicating inherited diseases.
Right.
But it also highlights the ethical concerns about playing God and the potential for unintended consequences that might not be apparent for generations.
Yeah, that's a big concern.
Yeah.
It's a debate that will likely continue for many years to come.
Oh, absolutely.
As our ability to manipulate genes increases, we need to engage in some thoughtful discussions
Yeah.
about the ethical implications of these technologies
We do.
and ensure that we use them wisely and responsibly.
Absolutely.
Well, let's move on to chapter 20, which explores a topic that's relevant to a lot of us, the cholesterol genes.
Yeah, cholesterol, everyone's favorite topic.
I know, right? So this chapter focuses on the ApoE gene on chromosome 19,
Right?
which plays a key role in regulating cholesterol metabolism.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so cholesterol, I mean, we hear a lot about it in the context of heart health.
Right.
So what's the connection between our genes and our cholesterol levels?
So while diet and lifestyle definitely play a big role,
Okay.
our genes can also predispose us to higher or lower cholesterol levels.
Okay.
The book explains how different versions of the ApoE gene
Okay.
can influence an individual's risk for coronary heart disease.
So there are different versions of the ApoE gene,
There are.
and some of them are associated with a higher risk of heart disease.
That's right.
Tell me more about that.
Okay, so the book focuses on 3 common versions of the ApoE gene.
Okay.
We call them alleles: E2, E3, and E4. E3 is the most common, and it's considered kind of the neutral variant.
Okay.
E2 is associated with lower cholesterol levels
Okay.
and a reduced risk of heart disease.
Okay, so that's like the good cholesterol gene.
You could say that, yeah.
And then E4 is the bad one.
E4 is associated with higher cholesterol levels
Okay.
and an increased risk of developing coronary heart disease.
Okay, I've also heard about ApoE4,
Yeah,
and it's linked to Alzheimer's disease.
right.
Does
That's
the
not,
book address that as well?
it does.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the ApoE4 allele is a risk factor for both heart disease and Alzheimer's disease.
So one gene, multiple potential health risks.
That's right.
That's tough.
It is.
What about the other alleles?
So E2 seems to offer some protection against Alzheimer's,
Okay.
while E3 is considered neutral in this context.
Okay, so it's a spectrum of risk
Right.
with E4 at the high end
Yeah,
and E2 at the low end.
that's right.
Okay, so what about the ethical implications of genetic testing for these ApoE variants? I mean, if someone knows they have the E4 allele, wouldn't that cause a lot of anxiety,
Yeah, absolutely.
knowing that they're at an increased risk for these 2 serious diseases?
It's a valid concern.
Yeah.
The book discusses the ethical dilemmas that come with knowing your genetic predisposition to incurable diseases
Right.
like Alzheimer's.
Right.
There are concerns about psychological distress, potential discrimination by insurance companies or employers,
Yeah.
and the fact that there's no effective treatment for Alzheimer's currently.
It makes you think carefully about whether you would even want to know your genetic risk for such a devastating disease.
Right.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, it's a complex issue
It is.
without easy answers.
Right, and as genetic testing becomes more widely available, these ethical considerations are going to become increasingly important.
Absolutely.
We need to think about the potential benefits and risks of genetic knowledge and ensure that individuals are empowered to make informed choices about whether or not to pursue testing.
Very much so.
Well, it sounds like we need a whole separate deep dive into the ethics of genetic testing.
Yeah, we could do a whole series on that.
We could, but that's a conversation for another time. So for now, let's turn to chapter 21. The prion genes.
Oh, prions. Fascinating and scary.
I know prions, those weird infectious proteins, the ones that cause mad cow disease.
That's right.
They've always seemed so mysterious to me. I mean, they're not viruses or bacteria. So how do they spread and cause disease?
It's a fascinating mystery that's captivated scientists for decades.
Yeah.
So the book explains that prions are misfolded proteins,
Okay.
meaning that they've adopted this abnormal shape.
Okay.
And here's the remarkable part. These misfolded prions,
Okay.
they can transmit their abnormal shape to other proteins,
Okay.
essentially corrupting them.
Sort of like a domino effect.
It is like a domino effect.
One misfolded protein triggers a chain reaction, causing other proteins to misfold as well.
That's a great way to think about it.
Wow.
This chain reaction leads to the formation of what we call protein aggregates.
Okay.
These are clumps of misfolded prions
Okay.
that disrupt the normal function of cells and tissues, particularly in the brain.
So a rogue protein can trigger this domino effect,
It can.
wreaking havoc in the brain. That's a pretty terrifying thought.
It is. It
All
is.
right, so the book talks about Stanley Prisner's groundbreaking work on prions.
Yeah, he won the Nobel Prize for this work.
Yeah, which earned him a Nobel Prize in 1997.
Yes.
So his research really challenged this long-held belief that infectious agents must contain genetic material like DNA or RNA.
That's right.
So prions are infectious even though they don't carry any genetic material.
That's right.
How is that even possible?
That's the amazing thing about prions. They don't replicate in the traditional sense.
Okay.
Instead, they convert normal proteins into misfolded prions. So
Interesting.
they're essentially propagating themselves through this conversion process.
It's like a zombie apocalypse at the protein level.
Yeah, a good analogy.
Right. One misfolded prion turns its neighbors into zombies,
That's right.
spreading the infection.
Yeah, and the book describes how prions cause a variety of neurodegenerative diseases,
Right.
including scrapie in sheep,
Okay.
mad cow disease in cattle,
Okay.
and Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease,
Right.
or CJD in
Yeah.
humans.
Mad cow disease, that's a name that sent shivers down my spine. I remember when it emerged in the 1980s and 1990s.
Oh, yeah,
It caused a lot of panic,
it did.
led to a lot of changes in the beef industry.
Yeah, major public health crisis.
So the book talks about mad cow disease,
It does.
or bovine spongiform encephalopathy.
That's right, BSE.
BSE, right, explaining how it's spread through the cattle populations in the UK.
So the practice of feeding cattle meat and bone meal
Right.
contaminated with prions from infected animals,
Right.
that turned out to be the culprit.
So it was like cannibalism gone wrong.
Yeah, basically.
Feeding cows to cows, inadvertently spreading these infectious prions.
Exactly.
Not a good idea.
Not at all.
So the book discusses the public health concerns surrounding BSE,
Yes.
particularly this discovery that humans could contract a variant of CJD.
Yeah, VCJB.
VCJD, right?
By consuming beef contaminated with BSE prions.
It's terrifying to think that something we eat could transmit such a devastating disease.
It is a scary thought.
Yeah, well, what measures were taken to kind of contain the spread of mad cow disease?
So the book describes the extensive public health measures that were implemented,
Okay.
including strict regulations on feeding practices of cattle,
Okay.
bans on certain animal products in the food supply,
Okay.
widespread testing of cattle for BSE.
It's a stark reminder that we need to be vigilant about food safety
Absolutely.
and the potential for infectious agents to spread through the food chain.
We do.
Okay, well, after that deep dive into the unsettling world of prions, let's turn to Chapter 22, which delves into a particularly dark chapter in the history of genetics.
Yeah, this is not a happy chapter. Yes, eugenics, a movement that emerged in the late 19th and early 20th centuries,
Okay.
advocating for the improvement of the human race through selective breeding.
Okay, so eugenics.
Right.
It's a stark reminder that even the best of intentions can go horribly wrong,
They can.
especially when science is intertwined with social and political agendas.
Absolutely.
So what does the book say about this?
The book discusses the flawed logic behind eugenics, which often relied on prejudiced and discriminatory views about race, class, and disability.
Right.
It promoted this idea that certain traits, such as intelligence,
Okay.
were solely determined by genetics,
Okay.
ignoring the profound influence of environmental factors.
Right, and it's a dangerous and dehumanizing ideology that led to some horrific practices. I mean,
It did.
forced sterilization
Yes.
and the segregation of individuals deemed unfit to reproduce.
Yeah, it's a dark stain on history.
It really is.
And the book doesn't shy away from exposing the horrific consequences of eugenics policies.
It's crucial to acknowledge this dark chapter in history
Yeah,
so that we can learn from those past mistakes
absolutely.
and ensure that they're never repeated.
We have to learn from the past.
Yeah. And as we delve deeper into the human genome,
Yeah,
gain more and more knowledge,
right.
we need to be mindful of the potential for misuse.
Absolutely. We must be vigilant in guarding against any attempts to revive eugenic ideas or use genetic information to justify discrimination or coercion.
Right. It's a sobering reminder that scientific progress must always be accompanied by ethical reflection.
Always, always.
Well, we've reached the final chapter, Chapter 23, Free Will.
The big question.
The big question, I know, and after this deep dive into the human genome, I have to ask, do we have any free will left?
This chapter tackles one of the most profound philosophical questions, the
Yeah.
question of free will
Right.
in the context of our genetic predispositions.
Right. After learning about all these genes that influence our behavior, our personalities, our susceptibility to diseases,
Yeah.
it's easy to feel like we're just products of our genes. Pre-programmed robots following a predetermined script.
Yeah, where does free will fit into all of this?
That's the question.
That's the paradox that the book explores. It acknowledges the powerful influence of our genes.
Right.
But it also emphasizes that we're not simply puppets controlled by our DNA.
So we're not just pre-programmed robots. We have some say in who we are and what we do.
So the book suggests that our sense of free will might be an illusion,
An illusion.
a necessary fiction
Okay.
that allows us to function in society
Got it.
and hold ourselves accountable for our actions.
So even if free will is an illusion, it's a pretty convincing one.
It is. We certainly feel like we're making choices freely,
We do.
even if those choices are ultimately shaped by our genes and our environment.
Right. So the book challenges this simplistic view of genetic determinism.
It does.
This idea that our genes dictate our destiny.
Right.
It emphasizes that complex interplay between genes and environment,
It does.
highlighting the fact that our choices and experiences can shape our biology,
That's right.
creating this feedback loop that makes predicting human behavior a really daunting task.
Very much so.
So it's a nature and nurture situation,
Yes.
even when it comes to free will.
Absolutely. Our genes provide the blueprint,
Right.
but our experiences and choices help to write the story of our lives.
That's a much more hopeful perspective.
It is. It's an empowering message that reminds us that we're not merely passive recipients of our genetic inheritance,
Right.
but active agents in shaping our own
Yeah,
destiny.
absolutely. Well, this has been an incredible journey through the Book of Life,
It has.
the human genome.
Yes.
What are some of the key takeaways from this deep dive?
I think one of the most important takeaways is that the genome is not a simple blueprint that dictates our lives.
Right.
It's this complex, dynamic system full of interactions, feedback loops, and unexpected outcomes.
Right.
Our genes influence us in countless ways,
Yeah.
but they don't determine our destiny.
Right.
We have the power to make choices, to learn and grow, to shape our own lives.
It's both humbling and exciting to realize how much more there is to learn about this intricate and fascinating code that makes us who we are.
Absolutely.
I mean, this book has really left me with a sense of awe and wonder
Yeah.
about the human genome. It's a reminder that we're all part of this grand evolutionary story,
We are.
connected by this intricate code that's been passed down through countless generations.
It's a beautiful thought.
It is, and it's a story that's still being written.
That's right.
And each of us has a role to play in shaping its next chapter.
Beautifully said.
Well, a huge thank you to our expert guide
Oh, thank you for having me.
for navigating us through this complex and fascinating terrain, and to our listeners. We encourage you to check out the show notes for links to further resources, including the book itself.
That's a great read.
Until next time, keep exploring the mysteries of the human genome.
Yes.
And remember, the journey is just as important as the destination.